You're a mom and a dad, two dads or two moms parenting. Learn how partners parent differently, why these differences can help your kids, and how they can strengthen your relationship with your partner. Next on Speak Your Mind. Welcome to Speak Your Mind. I'm Dr. Carolyn Phelps, licensed psychologist with the Human Development Center. If you're a two-parent family raising kids, then you might have noticed that your partner doesn't always parent exactly like you do. Even when you're on the same general page, you both may do things differently or have a different idea of what should be done in any given situation. And if you're a parent, you already know there are a lot of situations out there to be different about. Tonight, we're talking about how being true partners in parenting isn't both of you doing everything exactly the same way, and how differences aren't just okay, they're actually preferred. If you have questions about parenting with your partner, call us. Locally, dial 218-788-2844 or call toll-free at 1-877-307-8762. We'll be answering your questions throughout tonight's show. Joining me is Casey Ladd, the Director of Staff Development and Visionary for our Child and Family Services at the Human Development Center. Thanks for joining me on this very cold December evening.
It's always good to be on your show, Carolyn.
Now, there are a ton of books out there about how to parent, and a ton of resources about how to parent. And a lot of those resources focus on very specific how to potty train, how to get your child to sleep. All of these what do I do when and what do I do with this? But tell me about what this concept of partnership parenting is, because that sounds a little different than just a brass tacks how-to.
Well, and it's exactly as simple as really looking at parents who are able to work really respectfully together with some of the tensions and the conflicts that you, in your introduction, kind of highlighted, and being able to do so in a way that you're really listening to and understanding what each of the partner brings to that parenting relationship, and understanding how to blend those differing gifts to benefit the children.
And so when we think about this, when I think about parenting, you know, I imagine a couple maybe having a conversation early on, hopefully early on in their relationship, about, do you want children? And then sometimes with some of the families that I've seen, I get the idea like that was the only question that was ever asked. They agreed that they wanted to have children, but didn't have much of a conversation about, well, what was their parent philosophies going to be, and then find themselves all of a sudden, when they're in the middle of a situation, seeing where their differences are, and not always being real happy about that.
Well, and I think it's, like even similar to marriage, when we take those vows of for better or for worse, for richer or poor, we all take them and just kind of assume that the difficult times aren't going to apply to us. And I think the same thing can be true when we think about making decisions about, having a family, that there's an assumption that, that we're going to be able to work as well together in the role of co-parenting as we do in our relationship. And that's not always the case, because I think that you're oftentimes bringing in experiences from each of your own family systems, and that, you and I have both heard parents tell us, I promised myself I was not going to do the same thing that my mother or my father did, and then here I am crying about the fact that I repeated that. So, I think that when we're looking at that role of parenting, it just stirs up so much expectation that we have for ourselves, And then when you're having to really be in relationship with your partner around these issues, it can get tense. It can also be wonderfully smooth at times. So most of the time, let's hope that it's smooth and easy.
Now, the phrase co-parenting, we often hear that in relation to couples divorcing, but we really want people to start thinking about the concept of co-parenting so that, I mean, ideally, so that they're not divorcing, right?
Exactly.
And so can you just talk even a little bit about that concept of co-parenting and how, what you see that as meaning in a very practical sense?
I think that, that when we look at even, kind of the history of that parenting relationship, it changed, and the roles really changed with that we saw after the Industrial Revolution, that we had that for a time period, I think predominantly women who were staying home with children, and men who were, to be a good father meant that you were a good breadwinner, which meant that you really were not very involved and you were gone a lot. We now see that 87% of the fathers today are really committed to having a closer relationship with their children than their dads did. And so we're seeing something that's fairly unique right now in that dads are more involved and dads want to be more involved, and that can cause some additional stress as we're having to really support parents in trying to understand what they each have to bring to the table, and to really, I think, move away from something that we see often with infants, is that moms really want to make sure that the dads get it right, and what that means is that you do it my way. And so we'll see that with couples, that prior to the birth of the child, they may have a very collaborative way of resolving conflicts, understanding differences, negotiating, compromising, and then when the baby comes, that I think that it's not uncommon that we see the mom trump the dad around the differences. And that's what we really want to try to help couples navigate through, is how to not get in those standoffs where dad gets hurt, backs off, distances, but how we can really help families, for all of us, help young dads and young moms understand that they have different roles in parenting their children.
So what I hear a lot from young moms in that infancy stage is, I made this baby, therefore it's my baby, where they almost have sort of this proprietary sense about the couple's child. As if dad needs to sort of sign up or sign an agreement, or you need to read this book first. And that's kind of a little bit what you were describing. Mm-hmm. And then the conflict that arises now that dads want to be more involved and active, which moms sometimes agree with theoretically, but the practical, the real life play out of mm-hmm. that maybe produces some stress. And I imagine the sleep deprivation for everybody during infancy isn't helping anything either.
The sleep deprivation, we know that we don't like to tell young couples this, but marital satisfaction declines after the birth of your children fairly steadily until middle adolescence. And it doesn't mean that there's not a lot of joy, but it's like that the marital relationship is significantly altered. And so how is it that we're really bringing some of that satisfaction and joy in that shared responsibility of raising the child or children together as a couple?
Now, there's research that shows that there actually are gender differences, that this isn't just our imagination,
This is true.
And not just stereotypes. So talk a little bit about what those gender differences are and kind of what the strengths are that both parents bring to a parenting relationship.
Well, we know that for both, there are some of the similarities that happen, and then we'll talk about some of the differences. The similarities that at a hormonal level things change for both moms and dads. And I think that's new information for a lot of couples, that actually the dad's oxytocin levels also increase in response to the infant, and that there is this kind of literally kind of an opening of the heart and the soul to also bring the baby in to his kind of world. The differences that we'll see is that there is a gender tendency, and of course there are always those exceptions, so it's never always this way or always that way, but that we would see a more kind of typical pattern of being that mothers are really take that role of protecting and comforting the child, and dads of course protect and comfort, and that fathers will really focus on how is it that I help this child be in the world successfully. So even in terms of that, we'll see mothers as being sometimes more soothing and dads more stimulating. That even at 6 weeks, we will see that the infant responds to the mother when being held, kind of their eyes close, their heart rates go down, they kind of go into more of that sleep state. And at 6 weeks old, when the dad is holding the baby, eyes are awake, heart rates are kind of, and the child's awake and stimulated, and it's kind of like, Dad, let's play. So we'll even see different responses that early on in terms of about how children are either kind of slowing down and getting that comfort, or speeding up and getting more kind of active. You know, I'll hear young couples as well as, you know, school-age kids and parents coming in, and the mom's complaint is, it drives me crazy. He comes home from work, and I've just gotten the kids settled down, bath is ready, and he wants to wrestle with the kids, and the kids want to wrestle with him. And so those are some of, I think, the differences that we'll see in that parenting role.
The ways of relating to each other, and neither one of them being bad or good.
In fact, they're both necessary. You know, so for us as human beings, we need to learn, and our brains need to have the experience of kind of revving up and then calming down, and revving up and calming down. And so we'll see that as the child needs to know that I can both come to both parents and get kind of comfort and support, because we're not saying that dads don't comfort, and we're not saying that moms don't help kids prepare to kind of be in the world. And so we need, the child benefits from those differing kind of gifts that parents are able to provide.
So then one advice it seems like that we would have for parents is to first stop thinking in terms of that good and bad dimension. And that different doesn't have to exist on that good or bad dimension, and that the differences can be as important to your child's growth and development if you value those differences.
Absolutely. So in the long term, when we talk about what is a successful parent and what's the kind of the successful parenting process, it really is having a child launch into adulthood who has both the capacity to be in relationship as well as to be able to stand on their own 2 feet. And we have, and it is about really asking couples to kind of recognize that sometimes the parent who maybe is leaning more towards safety and protection may impede the child's being able to kind of go out into the world. And the parent who kind of is maybe emphasizing, you know, the world is a tough place and you have to go out there and, you know, go face it, that they may not give the child enough of the kind of the nurturance and support and encouragement. And that's sometimes where we'll see parents begin to really have some fundamental differences. It's like you expect too much out of him, you know, you baby her too much. And it really is about some of those differences about launching and protecting.
One of the really interesting, and I just sort of had this realization, the really interesting place where I feel like parents have this innate understanding about who does what better and allows the person who's better at the thing to do the thing, while and recognizing, like, I wouldn't do that well. Is there, who's teaching who how to drive? You know, where one parent is saying, you know, I think I would either kill my child because I would get so frustrated, or I would be so scared in the car with them, and I know that, and then we're going to get in an accident because of that. So I find that just really ironic that seems to be the one area where repeatedly parents innately understand who's good at this and then lets the other person just be good at it.
Well, isn't that what a respectful partnership is? That I recognize that you do some things, you know, better than I do or more easily than I do, and I can, you know, encourage and support you in doing that as a parent. And that when parents have that respect for the differences between the two of them and understand, you know, who's kind of going to lead in this kind of situation, it's so much better for the children. Because having that really united front where the kids have a sense that mom and dad, it's pretty difficult to get in between and to split and divide them, which is a normal thing that I think, you know, normal kids attempt to do. And when parents have that kind of mutual respect for each other and the kids know that, there is more security in the family. And in that I think children are able to thrive more.
And I would even say that it's their job to try to split their parents, in that, I mean, they're engaging in this very unique problem solving. They're trying to get their needs met. They're being very creative about that. And they're seeing how they can be independent and push to get their needs met. And it's like, oh, yeah, that's their job. And your job is to figure out where the line is and hold and hold that line then.
And to hold sacred that if this parenting relationship and this partnership as parents is really going to work, that when we get really upset and angry and frustrated with each other, that we are not processing that distress with the kids, that we could be calling sisters or, you know, friends, or getting kind of like venting outside, but trying to really preserve some of that sense with the kids, that they don't get, you know, fuel to do some of the splitting that I think is so, you know, destructive for kids who can become an ally with a mom against a dad or a dad against a mom.
Let's talk a little bit about how parents resolve differences. So now we've established that they have differences, and we also imagine that it's not just mom and dad families, but two dad families and two mom families aren't going to parent just because they're the same gender. They're not going to parent exactly the same. So this idea that we should value differences and parent respectfully sort of goes across whatever your family looks like. But how do parents begin to resolve those differences then?
So I think an essential first kind of formation of this new family between a mom, a dad, and a baby is how are we going to set some appropriate boundaries with the extended family. And so this is where sometimes the grandparents can be criticizing the, you know, the in-law for how they're parenting. And so I think firstly, it is about having to establish some kind of guidelines of saying that, you know, we're working this out and we're going to do it differently. And she came from, or he came from, a family that did things not the way our family did. And you just have to support us in being able to work that out. So it's to be kind of clear that it's not uncommon that you have to kind of set up some of those parameters. Then I think it's also important for us to help families and couples realize what's a marital issue and what's a parenting issue, and that you're trying to not fight the marital battle through the parenting relationship. And that's sometimes what we'll also see. And so it's like, try to be clear about that this is something that we're struggling with as a husband and wife, and those are going to be sometimes different than the mom and dad. So bottom line with any conflict is that we have to listen. We have to really listen hard enough that we understand what the differences are, and so important to keep criticism out of those discussions around conflict. So how is it that we listen with respect, and how is it that we keep those discussions between us so that they're safe, and that we stay in some ways kind with each other, even when we might have very strong opinions about, no, I don't think that she should be able to go and do this, or I think it's really important that she goes. That we really grow to say, okay, I need to, I'm on a very different place than you, but I want to hear what your concerns are. So let's really flesh out the concerns.
And what happens when they can't reach an agreement?
Well, this is where I think it's a matter of trust with the couple about, and rather than get the child caught in the middle, that how is it that we're going to be able to, that we're going to practice and we're going to learn, and this is a kind of a on-the-job training with each other, that it's kind of stepping back and saying, on this one, I'm going to step back and let you, because I think that you may be more attuned, or that you might have more of an understanding about what's going on. So it is about saying, is this going to be one of those issues that we just get in a standoff about? And I think the one that I told you about was the mom and dad who had the two boys, and the dad had trained the boys how to do a lot of this kind of good survival in the North Woods. And dad and the boys announced to the mom that the boys were going away they were going to go by themselves to the Boundary Waters for a month canoeing. And dad was totally sure that they could go do this. And the mom was like, no way, Jose, my babies are not going off. And they had to really work and to talk about what is it that she could accept and live with. And because her job really was about safety and protection, and he was just sure that they were going to be just fine. And so they came up with a compromise to really work that out. And it wasn't what the boys wanted.
So what I just heard you say that really is key is that, number one, you have to be willing to stay in the conversation. And that the conversation, this may not be resolved in 30 minutes. You have to be willing to come back to it and come back to it and come back to it. You have to really want to understand the other person rather than just defend your point of view on that. And want to win. Like if you're coming to the table, right, and what you're wanting to do is win, that's a setup for failure for the partnership. That's then right. That doesn't have the partnership in mind with that. We're getting really close to the end here, and this 2-hour show packed into 24 minutes. And so, what would you say as the sort of the quick 25-word words of encouragement to parents out there?
That your children love both of you, and they need the gifts that you have each to offer them, and so it behooveth you to somehow, whether that you work out in a respectful way of making sure that your child has access to each of you as your unique, wonderful selves.
Well, that's it. I got nothing. I can't do better than that. So what she just said is that your children's heart is large enough for both of you, and both of your hearts are large enough for all of you. Thanks so much for joining this discussion, and don't forget to visit us on the web at speakyourmindonline.org, where you can find a schedule of our topics and resource links. Now, because of the holidays, Speak Your Mind will be off the air for the next 2 weeks, and from HDC and WDSE, we wish you a peaceful 2 weeks filled with joy and love, whether you celebrate Hanukkah, Christmas, Kwanzaa, or just the spirit of the universe. And come back and join us on Thursday, January 7th, for our next program, when we'll be talking about Communication 101. Probably should have done that before the holidays with all the families, but we're doing it afterwards. I'm Dr. Carolyn Phelps. Thanks for watching, and good night.